Awesome. Welcome everyone to another workshop for the Infinite Space Bazaar. My name is Josh. I'll be your host from Celestia Labs, and I'm excited today to welcome Forrest from Conduit, who will be showing us how to launch a rollup using Celestia DA in less than 10 minutes. Forrest, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Josh. Really excited to show people how easy it is to launch a rollup on Celestia, use Celestia's modular DA, and hoping we can beat the 10-minute time bounds I set earlier. It might be closer to 15 minutes, but we'll see where we land.
All good. All right, I'm excited. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and get straight to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. So this is the primary page on the Conduit app. As a quick little intro, Conduit's a rollup as a service provider. So we make it really easy for anyone to launch rollups for their app or ecosystem. I think I have a rollup running already here on Ethereum Sepolia testnet using Celestia for DA. But just to show you how easy it is, we're going to run it back and do it again. So we're going to go to new deployment. This is our recipe builder UI on Conduit. So if you go to app.conduit.xyz/deploy, you can kind of start building your rollup from scratch. So we're going to choose the OP stack today as our rollup framework, and we're going to choose to settle on Ethereum L1. So this makes us an L2. That's where our bridge contracts are on L1. And then we're going to choose Celestia for DA. You can see Conduit has a bunch of rollups already deployed using this stack, including Avo, Ancient 8, Lyra, Hyper, Public Goods Network, Orderly Network, and a bunch of others. So we're just going to hit continue here. I've already entered my billing details, so we're going to race through this screen real quick, and then we're going to subscribe, and hopefully we can beat my 10-minute timer. So timer starts now at 2:05. We're going to start the deploy job. You can see I have this kind of auto-generated name. But while this is deploying, I want to just go ahead and give a tour of kind of the Conduit dashboard of what things look like once you are up and running. So this is the other chain I've deployed on Celestia. You can see here my components, what is kind of my chain ID assigned at random. I've chosen the same stack here, OP stack, Ethereum settlement layer, Celestia for DA. Developers, you get all of your JSON files and kind of Genesis files here out of the box. You can also get a bridge UI out of the box with any Conduit deployment. So I have this bridge auto deployed for me if I want to bridge some ETH here. I can just go ahead and send some testnet ETH directly to my brand new rollup that's 5 minutes old. I also get all of the logs, kind of a Heroku style dashboard. So I get my replica node, my sequencer, my proposer, my batcher, all of the components that are kind of core to running the rollup. You have visibility into all of that just here in the Conduit dashboard. I also have this kind of auto-hosted Block Explorer available. So Conduit hosts a version of Block Scout, the Block Explorer for every single one of our rollups. So I have this kind of random slug today. You can go out and customize it. You can see I don't even have any transactions on my rollup yet. So we're hoping we can make the first one here in a moment. But at a high level, this is what everything will look like once deployed, once we're live. I think part of the beauty of Conduit is just how easy we make it to deploy these rollups. So let's look at where we're at. We're still in the middle of this deployment. We're going along strong. But just to kind of give you a quick tour of the app, we have tons of different mainnet and testnet rollups available in kind of our directory page. You can see people like Avo and Ancient 8 highlighted here at the top who did choose the OP stack with Celestia. I think a big advantage of using Celestia modular DA for rollups is just the kind of break-even point of your rollup operationally is much lower. So whereas using Ethereum DA, even after blobs, there just is a higher requirement in transaction volume that you need to generate in order to have your rollup break even, net of DA fees, net of operational fees. For Celestia, this is just right? So much cheaper, as well as just a bit more modular and a bit more purpose built, right? Data availability sampling is something on Ethereum's roadmap. Celestia has it today. So if we head over to Selenium, right, we have this great explorer of different rollups on Celestia. So Conduit's actually running 6 of the 9 rollups displayed here. We run Orderly, we run Avo, we run Lyra, Ancient8, Public Good Network, and Hyper. So we're definitely a Celestia power user as a company and as a project. I think what's cool is that not all of these networks started on Celestia. Conduit actually facilitated them transitioning from Ethereum DA. They were paying a lot in gas fees. This is back in December of last year. We did not have blobs yet, so we were all using call data, which is very expensive for rollups to post to. So these rollups were all, frankly, overpaying by using Ethereum call data. And Conduit was able to seamlessly port all of them to Celestia in one day. So I think that's one of the cool components about DA is that it is this feature of chains that you can actually swap out in a very modular sense, or you can even post to multiple layers, which I think is something that we are seeing a lot more interest in at Conduit, and I think going to be a big trend kind of through the end of this year and beyond. So that's just a brief glimpse at some of our live rollup customers. Let's go back and check on our deployment job. Earthworm chain is looking good. We're still kind of in the nascent part of it, but I'd love to just go back and kind of sit here and wait a little bit while this job finishes. But just while we're on the topic, I think cost is one reason that we see teams choose to go to Celestia, but I think there are a lot of components too. I think that there's a lot of DA is ultimately your data availability layer is ultimately where your rollup derives security from. And I think that with something like Celestia's Ethereum fallback, we've had a lot of builders be just so much more comfortable knowing that there is that kind of last resort built in. And I think that has really just Celestia has proven itself through its many months on mainnet in being a great option that is, while more nascent than Ethereum, still very secure, and knowing and like having a good track record of being live and having uptime. So there's certainly a lot more going on in the data availability space and many more layers coming. But I think Celestia is one of the few with the track record there to show that you'd have redundancies built in. You're ready to actually host all the data, all the DA for a live production rollup. There isn't anyone at the Celestia level today outside of rollups deployed on Ethereum. So I think it has that Lindy effect to it where we feel very comfortable with it. Our engineering team at Conduit feels very comfortable working with Celestia, kind of having been power users for so long. And there's also an element where it's proven itself at market for so many people in production. We'll keep checking on the deployment job. Josh, maybe I'll throw it to you if you want to add anything.
Yeah, actually, I had a question on.
We're getting logs.
Yeah, good logs indeed.
Go ahead.
I'm curious what it's like for maybe an L2 that already exists as one that uses Ethereum for call data. What is that process like to switch over to using Celestia for DA and then also for having Conduit be the kind of like home for DevOps for that chain?
Yeah, great question. I think the good news is from like the rollup users and the rollup team's perspective, that's seamless. So Conduit kind of handles the operations and the network upgrade and the management there. So we make it, there's no network downtime or anything like that. It's just kind of this seamless transition. I think what is worth noting is the thing that needs to be immediately upgraded on the rollup side is how you're charging gas fees. So you kind of have these fee scalers that are built into the OP stack rollup that are assuming you're deriving gas costs based off of L1 prices, and in tandem and kind of in concert with porting over to something like Celestia for DA, you have to revise what your gas costs look like. And obviously you're just revising downwards. So I think in the beginning, this was a bit more of like a guessing game of like, hey, we can be, we'll knock it down X amount. Like maybe we can start with a 10X flat reduction in fees and then see how the economics work. And then we work with those teams to kind of scale it down from there, see what their transaction
Nice.
volume is looking like, and see what those scalers, because I think that both the teams and ourselves, we want to bring the maximum amount of savings to users. So we want to push those scalers as close to break even as possible. So I think what we started with these kind of 6 rollups that ported over to Celestia in one go is we started with a flat 10x reduction to that L1 data fee scaler. But what we found is that we can push it much lower. And I think in reality, it's upwards of 30 or 40x in terms of what you can do sustainably. So I think operationally, it's a network upgrade just to adjust that fee scaler. And Conduit manages that for teams, so they didn't have to take any action on their part. It's a bit more manual today. I think in true Conduit spirit, as hopefully you've seen on the UI, we want to make porting between DA layers closer to a one-click process in the future. But there's certainly, I think, a lot of maturity and kind of standardization we need to reach in the space before then.
It's a kind of interesting question for me to ask, but let's say that I took an L2 and swapped it to using Celestia for DA. Would it be easy to go back to using call data or blobs on Ethereum?
Technically, yes, it would be easy.
Yeah.
It would be easy enough to go back. I think what I was hinting at earlier with these kind of tandem DA layers is we think that, first of all, the rollup, you have one primary DA layer, but I think more and more people will realize that they might want to just back up on one. And so they might be running 2 modular DA solutions in parallel, maybe Celestia as kind of the primary, hey, I'm very confident that this is going to have uptime. My data will be there. There's a network of thousands of validators out there running who are verifying that this data is in fact there. And then maybe I use another modular DA solution as basically a glorified database. I think this is where we're going in the space, is these things are just so cheap that in order to, again, just build redundancy, if DA is the ultimate kind of security derivation layer of these rollups, you want to have redundancy. So to answer your question, it's very easy to port back to blobs. It would be more expensive even at current blob prices that are not so crazy. And frankly, we only expect more volume in the future for blobs.
Interesting. Cool. I have a question from the YouTube audience from Celestia. How many testnets and mainnets have gone through Conduit? And I'm imagining this is not specific to Celestia, but just how many chains are running?
Yeah, great question, Celestia. So Conduit has 20 plus mainnets. 6 of those are running on Celestia today. And then we have 180 plus testnets, maybe 182 by the time we're done with this demo. So our logs are looking good. I think, probably only a couple more minutes here before I get the full dashboard for the new network. But yeah, I think we're at 23 mainnets today. We have a customer list on our website if you want to check that out. I think we have the full kind of spectrum of rollups that are out there today. We have large general purpose chains like Mode Network, and we also have app-specific chains for Avo and Zora and Lyra and many others.
Another question from Celestia is, any interesting rollups come to mind?
Any interesting rollups come to mind? Certainly on the Celestia side, I think we're big fans of all of our rollups, so I don't want to single any out in particular. But I've been working on a case study recently for Orderly Network and how we're powering their settlement layer. They're using the OP stack on Celestia DA. I think it's a very unique use case for them compared to how a lot of traditional rollups work. They have a network of a bunch of different dexes across 10 plus chains, and they use their rollup as just kind of an internal accounting and settlement layer. So maybe not super fun for users or to bridge to for using it as a traditional rollup, but they can use it as kind of their own settlement layer and clearinghouse for this entire network of brokers and traders and market makers across a bunch of different chains. So I think that's been a really interesting use case to explore that is a bit different than I think the traditional app chain or general purpose smart contract platform that we see. So I'll shout that one out in particular, but I mean, our rollups on Celestia are awesome. Avo, obviously leading derivatives exchange. Lyra's working on really, really cool stuff in the options world. Ancient 8 is kind of leading the charge in on-chain gaming and a bunch of others.
Awesome. And I'm curious to ask, while we're watching the logs, which do look like they're going well, what all is happening here? And like what kind of infrastructure is Conduit spinning up that kind of saves us from like ending up in days worth of docs and other docs and configs?
Totally. I think at a high level, the easy way to think about this is we're spinning up an instance of the software called OP Node for you. So OP Node is kind of the primary node version for an optimistic rollup. And what we're doing in parallel is it takes some time to kind of verify that, yes, the smart contracts for our rollup are deployed. And yes, we're ready to start processing the system transactions for an OP stack rollup. So OP has a block with a system transaction every 2 seconds in its default configuration. This one will be launching in the default configuration. And so what we're kind of preparing and verifying on our end is that, yes, we've got our version of OP Node up and running. We're keeping up with kind of the tip of the chain, and we're ready to start processing system transactions. And yes, our DA is there, and we're ready to post the data from the system transactions onto Celestia. So that's kind of all the stuff we're verifying. That's why we're waiting, because it just takes a little time to, first of all, verify that smart contracts do exist, as well as just kind of verify that all of the infrastructure to support it. Again, to cut out, we'll leave our deployment be for a moment. We'll go to the live one to verify that a sequencer, a proposer, a batcher, and a replica node are all up and running for my new chain. So the sequencer, this is kind of the main primary big box for the chain, if you will, that's processing all incoming user transactions. The proposer and the batcher are handling posting the L2 data to the settlement layer and the DA layer. So in this case, posting to Ethereum Sepolia, the test network, as the settlement layer, posting the state roots there, and posting DA blobs on Celestia. And then the replica node is more just like a watcher node that's listening to the tip of the sequencer and kind of reading logs from there. So that's kind of all the infrastructure being deployed under the hood here. Again, part of the beauty of what we're building is we get to abstract a lot of this away from you, and you get to kind of not focus on being DevOps oriented and instead focus on being application oriented.
And in the case where I do want to be a little bit DevOps oriented, is it possible to change, like you mentioned, a 2-second block time? Is it possible to change those configs?
Yeah, all of those. I think the way we think about customizations. Oh, here we go. On-chain execution complete
Nice.
and successful. Beautiful. That's exactly what we want to see. We'll give it a few more minutes here. So that to answer your question, yes, you can mess with the parameters. I think we work closely with teams like Optimism and Arbitrum to help you understand at the end of the day what are the safe ranges. People get annoyed by the withdrawal window on optimistic rollups, right? That's 1 week by default for fraud proofs. And I think we have people come in and ask, hey, why can't I make this 30 minutes? And we have to be prepared to kind of push back and let people know that, hey, this has big security considerations and trade-offs for your stack. So we can help you pick a lot of the parameters. Not all of them are available through our UI yet. You can kind of customize the gas limit and the withdrawal window through the UI today. But I think, things like even a custom gas token or other like smaller customizations, custom precompiles, those are things that we can kind of help you with in the lead up to your deployment. The block time one is a really interesting one. I think, Arbitrum today has a faster block time than the OP stack. And I think we see a lot more people getting very excited about kind of pushing that block time lower. Base has been very public about this as well, is ultimately we want to get all rollups kind of at or below 1 second block time. I think is kind of where we're going through the end of this year, probably.
That's exciting. It's also scary fast.
Yeah.
Another question from the chat, which I think I might be able to answer part of, but maybe you have more information on the EVM side. From Surendra Patil, what all price oracles are supported on Celestia, especially with CosmWasm? So I think on the CosmWasm front, I actually am not sure kind of what the standard is for a Cosmos chain there. But I think that is a great question for like the developer Discord or for the Infinite Space Bazaar Discord. I'd be happy to kind of chat about that there. But I'm curious what type of oracles you might recommend people use for an EVM.
Yeah, got some type of error in my logs. I'm just refreshing and looking at it. As far as oracles go, I think I can speak for the EVM side, that we have Conduit teams who work with pretty much every oracle out there. So we have teams working with Pith Network, we have teams working with Redstone, Dia, a whole lot of other awesome oracle options that are out there on the EVM side. I know there are some also very, very cool teams working in the CosmWasm world on oracles, but I can just speak less to them because Conduit runs EVM rollups today. So that's what we have the most experience with. But it's a great question.
Yeah, I guess on that note, does Conduit plan to support Cosmos SDK, like RollKit rollups at some point, or staying focused on EVM?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's something we are kind of constantly assessing on our side is what makes sense. Where is their demand today? I think that's always the big question for us. And then I will say that we are a very small team. Conduit's 14 or 15 people. So a lot of it has to do with where can we allocate engineering resources to today. But I think at a high level, like we're not, married to the current tech stacks that are out there, and we understand that there are awesome gains that can be had. I'm going to see what's going on with our Earthworm chain real quick. I don't know why I'm not getting a healthy log stream. We had the successful deployment. Curious to what happened there. But I think the Cosmos, right, the challenge there would be helping people and making kind of an interface and a game plan for people to bootstrap the validator set. So there's the one dimension, right, that is the roll kit side. That would be a little bit more analogous to what we're doing with EVM rollups today. And then there's also the Cosmos L1 side with the Cosmos SDK. That is, can we actually quickly stand up and bootstrap a validator, 10 validator set or something to get you up and running. So it's just a little bit more overhead. It's certainly something I think I can say that we've looked into and are constantly assessing. Get another timeout. Let's dig in.
I've said it like every time something goes wrong during a live demo, but you can't actually do a live demo without something going wrong. So
here we are.
Things happen.
Proposer is fine. It seems like it's the sequencer that we're not getting logs from yet. Everything is out there. Well, we'll see what's going on.
And I guess aside from you mentioned OP node is a lot of what is running for the actual blockchain or like rollup itself to operate. But there's also a block explorer. There's also a bridge. I guess you also have the RPC URL for people to use to put into their MetaMask or whatever wallet, as well as WebSockets. So there's a lot of infrastructure that's being managed.
I think that's the challenge, and that may be why we're encountering some delays here. I think that's kind of the beauty as well, is that it is feature complete and you get so many things out of the box. But yeah, keeping the block explorer up to date with the tip of the chain right away, having RPC endpoints literally as the chain is deployed, ready to go for people to start using and consuming, and having that whole kind of process that I think traditionally has taken either weeks, if not months, into a couple of minutes here for a roll up is part of another timeout. Bummer. Big bummer. We're gonna leave Earthworm alone for a second and see if they can sort themselves out, and we're gonna stare at different logs instead and see what's going on. Watch the pasture here. So you can see where we actually have, an interesting log here. It looks like, it's already gone. It looks like we may have missed a batch to Celestia and fallen back to Ethereum.
Oops, double error. Yeah.
Double error. Yeah. So it looks like we failed for some reason a submission for this rollup on Celestia, and so we actually fell back to call data on Sepolia. So I think that's just something you can catch in action. That is the Ethereum fallback in action. So I'm actually kind of glad we caught that log while we were on the go here. And I think maybe you can speak to a little bit as well, Josh. But like the reason that it's really nice to have that fallback is because in the event that there's not some sort of fallback, you are just looking at like either ultra delayed finality or even potentially some form of downtime for these user transactions specifically, right? Withdrawals is what we're looking at when we're thinking about finality. Yeah, maybe you want to riff on that a little bit.
I guess I would just say that like another thing, I don't know if that like reorgs also would come along with that, from what I understand about OP Stack.
Yep, that's another big pain point we've seen
to avoid. Yeah. Unfortunately, it looks like that was an account sequence error on the DA submission. So that is a bug to be dealt with.
Is a bug to be dealt with. We will
Are these they're posting to Mocha by default, right?
I believe they're posting to Mocha by default. I'd be surprised if they're not.
Yeah, that makes sense.
My understanding is that they are. Yeah, we'll dig into why this isn't working on testnet. I am curious actually to see why we're getting these errors. Let's check on Earthworm though. Let's see what's going on. Still having some troubles. It might be the replica node. That's why our RPC and our WebSockets aren't fully lined and giving us the green light yet. So, and the block explorer was empty. It wasn't populating data there. So it might be some of the periphery infrastructure. The replica might be having trouble. That's powering the explorer. Go back to the salmon swallow. Yeah, the reorgs one is, I think, a really interesting point you make, Josh, that is pretty much the worst thing that can happen in terms of not only is it like the downside case, but it's also like pretty catastrophic to have essentially transactions reversed, right? And then that can cause problems for users when balances, right, change. Obviously, the teams behind these rollups, if they experience some type of reorg, that's pretty devastating for them oftentimes. And it's just, it's a reason why we want to have redundancies in certain areas within the stack. And it's a real advantage that you can keep things continuous. So it's been a big advantage of the OP stack on Celestia today. It's why chains are able to enjoy this setup and this configuration in production and feel so good about things. The worst we'll hear from them is, hey, it looks like I had to overpay and post a couple of transactions on ETH call data, rather than the worst case scenario being, we just lost 100 blocks. What happened?
Yeah. Which I guess could happen pretty quickly at 2-second block times too.
At 2-second block times, blocks happen fast. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess some like questions on the user side of Caldera or Conduit. I'm so sorry. Does Conduit plan to support Arbitrum Nitro for like orbit chains? And what other kind of things could I use with Celestia in the future?
Yes, so we are working on our Orbit Celestia integration right now. We had it up for a little while actually and encountered a reorg issue on our side. And so we didn't want people to experience that, right? So we had to take it down a little bit and do some maintenance, but working on Orbit X Celestia, right? It is a newer integration. It kind of just came out of audit. So it's been a pleasure working with both the Celestia folks and the Off-Chain Labs folks on that. I think we are looking at other DA solutions as well, and see interest there. I think there is a component where I think there is some amount of network effect on the DA solution side where, again, I think a lot of it derives not just from costs, because a lot of these alternative layers are going to be within the same range of each other cost-wise. I think a lot of it has to do with security. and which one of these is proven in production for multiple mainnet rollups. And frankly, the answer today is Celestia. And ETH call data and ETH DA are the ones that have gone out and kind of satisfied the burden of proof. And I think we'll constantly assess both demand from our customers and kind of maturity of technology elsewhere. I think something else that Celestia has been super useful for is Celestia is powering like pretty much all of the base L3s that are out there today, which is a really exciting space that I think just we've seen a ton more interest in, with base taking off so much and kind of building its own unique identity in the layer 2 world. There are apps on top of base that are ready to go out and scale and grow faster, and they need cheap transactions and to be able to move quickly and deploy their own chain. Celestia was an absolutely perfect fit and is now powering almost all the base L3s that are out there today, and we have some more in the pipeline too that'll be posting Celestia DA very soon.
That's awesome. Which are the 3 that are down there?
Yeah, so these teams are, this is Stack. This is a loyalty points project. Very, very cool stuff they're working on. This is Gold, which is an on-chain RTS L3. So they have one kind of crop farming simulator game out there today, and they're working on a couple of more. And then this is Click, who is also known as STP. It's the chain for STP Network, who's kind of doing some cool like AI and gaming work on top of their base L3. So all very cool teams. I think that's maybe the most exciting thing about base L3s is it's not always just the typical like DeFi or NFT use cases. We have people who are really, really consumer and social and gaming oriented, who are going out and building applications on base, realizing that there's a massive user base there that they can cater to and onboard into these kind of dedicated environments. So it's really cool that both the distribution of something like base and the technology of things like Conduit and Celestia are able to power these experiences of people who are racking up loyalty points on Stack applications, don't really know that they're using crypto under the hood all the time. And I think that's part of the beauty of what these modular blockchains can do, taken to the extreme.
Curiosity that have used Zora or Mode as their base layer.
Sorry, we finally have logs.
Nice. We can go to those.
Firing. Yeah, Zora and Mode are also 2 L2s that Conduit, 2 Conduit rollups, and we have a couple of teams working on kind of the first Zora and Mode L3s out there today. Presumably, especially if they're using the OP stack, those will also use Celestia for DA. Again, I think it's a big advantage of L3s want to have a lot more control over their user experience than L2s do on average, and having a modular DA solution like Celestia out there in order to have really low transaction fees while still having like secure data availability and kind of deterministic security for your chain. I think that's a massive strength.
And going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of like fee reduction, you were saying that like at an economic sustainability level, you can reduce fees by like 30 to 40 times.
Yeah, it's still
pretty much.
I think it's still pretty much something we have to monitor. Again, these systems are months old, not years old. But at a high level, of the way we started with all of the networks so late January was when we ported over our first set of networks from ETH call data to Celestia. So this was Avo, Lyra, Orderly, and others. We have a blog post out about it. We started off with a 10x reduction to the L1 scaler in the OP stack configuration. And I think what we've realized is having run these for a couple more months now is that we can go even lower, and we can continue kind of revisiting these values on maybe a monthly basis with teams and seeing how the economics are working for them and their users. Because for some of those applications, for some of those rollups, transaction fee revenue is important to them. For some of them, it's not, and they want to be like absolute break even and have the cheapest fees possible for their users. So it's really just actively working with those teams, figuring out what makes the most sense, revising these things downwards as we go. But I think we're realizing that in production, the reduction for the DA there can be much closer to like something like 40 or 50x lower than Ethereum call data.
Is there a way that I could see where the data is being posted to Celestia?
Yes. Let's grab, let me see. One second. I might need to. Give me one moment here. I might look on Selenium and see if I can get my rollup there. I should be able to view it there, I believe, on Selenium Mocha. It might take me a moment, though. Apologies.
All good.
We want to make this a lot easier and more visible and kind of have first-class support for Selenium in the future. But it's still a work in progress. Let's see. Yeah, so you can imagine in the future for Celestia rollup on Conduit, we might have the namespace just available under the network information. That'll make everything much easier, right? To kind of view exactly where you're posting. So this might just take me a little searching to do today.
It's okay.
You can imagine that in the future, right? It's just available by default for all Celestia rollups. Very easy. It could even be right viewable in our directory page. If I go to, I have too many tabs open now. But if I go to, come on, love demos, right? If I go to Avo mainnet, maybe I can see, not just the slug and the chain ID and all of these things here, like the endpoints, but I could also see the Celestia namespace and see exactly where I'm kind of posting these receipts.
Definitely useful, I think.
Definitely useful. Let's see what our logs look like for Earthworm. Yeah, it looks like we're encountering the same blob submission issue. That's okay.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Devs are doing something.
Yeah, I guess other than that, everything is running. The chain is still valid. It's just posting call data instead.
Exactly. Posting using the fallback. So you can see if I go to my Explorer for Tomato Earthworm, we are doing our system transactions. So again, these are not anything that I'm doing out there. These are just the kind of regular cadence 2-second system transactions that are built into the OP stack that kind of just post data from L1. So that's kind of the data that we're uploading right now. I think it's interesting to point out that in the Nitro stack, we wouldn't have any of system transactions. You only have transactions when there is an incoming L2 transaction out there. So we wouldn't have as much of like a busy machine gun logs, but there's also less overhead from a data perspective.
Yeah, I found that actually when I was working on the documentation for Orbit and it wasn't producing blocks. I'm like, wait, what's going on? This is not working. But it turns out that's actually the default.
It's a feature for sure, because you don't have to post transactions if there's not any activity happening on the chain. But I do think it's sometimes a bit counterintuitive to how people think about kind of continuous blockchains and what we're used to, especially looking at the Explorer and seeing maybe right when you stand up a testnet, like long gaps between transactions. So I think that's something that I've definitely talked about with multiple teams before is, why is there an hour between my blocks on my Nitro rollup? Well, did you wait an hour to send transactions? Yeah.
there was no
Oh,
music.
well, then there's your answer.
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
Is there
I'm happy
anything
to.
else? Yeah, I guess what's in the metrics tab here?
Yeah, so this is kind of just the basics of what you'd want to monitor on both the infra level and kind of the periphery level. So we're actually in the process of rebuilding this page. I think we'll have the new version actually out this week, and it'll feature sequencer revenue very prominently up here, right? The main kind of economic driver of rollups, but you can just measure your requests, response times for your chain in the Explorer, as well as monitor the balances. So it's a bit, this is a bit old of a feature, but I think people do generally like checking it on some sort of like weekly or monthly cadence, and then come back to Conduit and say, hey, I noticed that I had this spike in requests. Let's kind of backdate it and look at what type of event we had on chain and what led to that. So I think it's a good tab for people today. I think in the future, we're kind of making it this hub for the economics of the chain, closely following on different time windows my costs, and making it very just as granular to track sequencer revenues as you can like RPC requests. So I think that's where we're heading with the feature, which I think is really nice. And then under settings, we just have kind of everything you would expect. So all of our rollups are private by default. You can publish them, so anyone can view your network and its utilities, and you can get listed on the directory page. You can pause the deployment as well. You can also enable external nodes. So again, this is something that just like out of kind of respect for teams that want to have private development cycles, we have that flag disabled to start, but you can enable external nodes for other parties to start syncing. And then customization wise, you can, any network on Conduit, you can customize. Instead of having the gross slug on my RPCs in my Explorer, I can customize with my brand, my assets, and then very soon we'll have the entire block scout available in here as well to customize with all of your brand.
Are there any features that are in the works with Conduit that you're excited about?
I think the sequencer fee dashboard. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I said that you're able to share.
The sequencer fee dashboard is one we're really excited about, because I think a lot of people look at rollups. I think Base in particular has brought this kind of to prominence, is like looking at rollups as kind of a standalone business. Like people really want to get granular with the unit economics of a rollup, and people want to understand like, well, what's my break-even point in terms of profitability or sustainability? How many transactions do I need a day, a week, a month, et cetera, in order to turn this, chains I think have typically been thought of as kind of a cost center. And I think that rollups, because of how light they are in terms of both the infrastructure and the economic investment you need to make, can be a revenue center. So I think we just want to bring more awareness and transparency to those values, and really be kind of a hub for people to come in and look at the economics behind different rollups. So obviously L2Beat's doing an incredible job of this today, measuring how much are these, how frequently are these chains posting, what type of fees are they paying. You can go view dashboards on Dune as well today. But I think where conduits will be a little bit differentiated is more of like, hey, this is the real time breakdown of your network. Here was the hour when you were profitable. Here was the hour when you were not profitable.
Yeah.
Here are the different things that factor into that. I think that's a really big one. And then I think, there are always new stacks in development and new things in the works. But the sequencer fee dashboard, I think will just make a lot of users really happy, both for people who have rollups out there today and want a bit more access to that info, rather than, this is all on chain. You could go pull all of this from an Explorer or through some sort of gas API, but rather than doing that, let's give you nice visuals to follow the trends historically. And then I think a bunch of other nice to haves. I think having more integrations out of the box is something that we're working on. So you get the block explorer, you get the bridge, you get the transaction tracer today. Tomorrow, you can imagine the full kind of bundles of tooling that are out there for rollups are not just in our network, and we can connect you with the leading Oracle teams and the leading bridge teams, but also within the UI that I can one-click add an onboarding tool or an account abstraction partner to my rollup, and the right on or off chain message is sent to them to kind of deploy and be ready on my chain. So I think those are two of the more exciting things we have in the works.
I like it. And I guess like would something like verifiable randomness be one of those modules?
Yeah, verifiable randomness is something we hear a lot, especially from gaming teams, right? Who need something deterministic, and maybe it's just expensive or slow to do through another larger Oracle provider. But they also don't want to build it in house because it might just be like a very non-verifiable, and it might just be kind of like an off-chain calculator spitting out a random number that is a trusted component. So I think having an out-of-the-box tool for people, again, mostly gaming builders, to have a verifiable random function built in, that's certainly one. I think built-in Gnosis safes is another component that is such a critical point of tooling for so many people that, yes, you can go get it deploy it yourself, right? But then you have to, stand up a front end and kind of manage and keep it up to date. So having some of those things out of the box for teams will just extend the functionality of your rollup and make it more useful day zero.
I noticed in the settings, there's an option to allow people to run external nodes.
Mm-hmm.
And back on one of the pages that lists the different rollups that are running, I think, yeah, on Ancient 8, yeah. It looks like, is that one of the chains that has that option on? So basically anyone can go and run a node for the chain.
Exactly. You're all over it. I think they had a community initiative of they wanted more people to be able to run replica nodes. And I think at a high level, a lot of our rollups want people to prepare for this world that through the end of this year, you'll have single sequencers, but you'll have permissionless validation on both the OP stack and the Arbitrum Orbit stack. And I think we're seeing a lot more teams want to give their community members ways to be involved and ways to kind of verify the chain. And either running replica nodes today or running validators, like light validators in the future, is a great way that communities and kind of other developers in your ecosystem can get involved and play a role in kind of the safety and security of the chain while still running something pretty light and not picking up too much overhead. So Ancient 8, I think, was one of the first to enable running a node. A lot of this too is just who has kind of demand out there. So Avo, again, a lot of their components are off-chain. For their core logic, their order book notably. But Mode is a large general purpose network. We've had a ton of people come in and want to run Mode nodes. Sorry, got tripped up there. But a lot of people wanted to come in and run Mode nodes. Maybe this is another like a tertiary RPC provider. Maybe this is a trader who wants to have a replica node stream and be a bit faster trading on DEXs on Mode. But a lot of different use cases to run replicas and run nodes out there today.
It actually brings me to my next question, which was about RPC providers. So with that option turned on and the ability for external parties to run nodes, does Conduit provide any sort, like, I guess let's just take Ancient 8, for example. That RPC that is provided by Conduit isn't something that would really be good to share to the rest of the world? Or I guess the question here is,
so Conduit does...
How robust is the RPC infra with Conduit versus like allowing some external party to run the node and provide that infrastructure?
Sure. We are the primary RPC provider for all of our chains. So it is an auto-scaling RPC. It's feature complete with what you would see at like another large third-party provider. We feel it's also like very competitively priced as well. Like every mainnet gets a very healthy package. And any user can come in here and kind of just check what they want an endpoint for. So let's say I want let's do all of the Celestia mainnets, right? So Avo, Ancient 8, Gold, Base L3, Orderly, PGN, all the way down, right? We'll get our own dedicated endpoints here for any of those and kind of have the same consumption dashboard you would expect to see. Can work in, regenerate a new key if I do show it publicly. So I'll regenerate it as soon as I'm off this call. as well as like, monitor my usage, monitor my consumption. So we did kind of just recently make our RPC product like truly a first-class citizen, for anyone to be able to come in and browse for Conduit rollups. So certainly, as a chain gets busier, it may make sense to bring in a third party. But I think what people find is that for most use cases, the Conduit RPCs auto scale and they don't really have any problems with them. I think it's an auto scaling problem. It's a lot easier to run an RPC for a brand new network compared to something like Zora and Mode, where you have dozens of different providers and applications building on it out there. So the dynamics look different, but we have the infrastructure out there to support it today.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. I feel like I saw an announcement on Twitter or something, but I didn't actually go this far to looking into it. So it looks like it would track like anyone out there could have their own access to this. And I'm sure there's like a free level, but then also if you're really like a power user, you could pay for compute units, it looks like.
Exactly. So I'll have kind of 400 million compute units out of the box across all of these rollups on my key. And then we kind of have a $50 a month tier called Pro, and then kind of enterprise tiers. But you do get, I think it's important to stress that for any rollup, like you should consider this as your like primary public endpoint. So this is the one you can resolve with your own custom domain. So if I'm Earthworm chain, I can make this like rpc.earthworm.xyz. And that can be the public endpoint that users put in my MetaMask. And then if there are power users, like you said, who need a different endpoint or maybe want to use a WebSocket apart from the large public one, they can come in and spin up their own on Conduit and start kind of prepaying for usage. So you get a lot of usage, and our public endpoints are able to withstand a lot of the load. But for larger chains, for chains like Avo, chains like Lyra, chains like Zora and Mode that have really taken off, some power users really love coming in, getting a dedicated WebSocket, getting a dedicated RPC. It's one of those things that it's nice to have. And it may not seem like much, but when there is network congestion and a lot going on the public endpoint, that dedicated endpoint for kind of power users can play a big role.
Absolutely. I'm a little curious what. Oh yeah. Oh nice. What the setup looks like for adding a custom domain to my rollup. Is that just as simple as it like putting the URL in here and then adding a DNS record? Or
yeah, exactly. It's you input like what you want to resolve to for the Explorer and the RPC key here, and then whoever your DNS provider is, whatever type of setup you're using, you can go in and make the changes there. I will note like the main pain point people encounter here is proxying from Cloudflare, which is a great service. But you want to disable that before doing this. Yeah, it's pretty easy. I think most teams are able to get their records resolved within 30 minutes, but I think it's DNS records, and sometimes those can take up to a day to fully resolve. But yeah, it's a really easy process. It's nice that it's self-serve and it's not manual for anyone involved.
For sure. I want to just ask the audience if there's any more questions for Forrest about Conduit, about launching a rollup, to please drop them in the chat as we're getting towards the end of the hour. I guess, Forrest, I want to ask you if there's any last things you want to show off or any other features that you're excited about, for example.
Yeah, I'd love to say just, if you're in the Infinite Bazaar Discord, we've shared some free testnet codes in there in the Conduit channel. Ping me on Discord if you're wanting to launch and encountering anything there. We're happy to share free testnet codes, get you up and running with whatever your preferred stack is using Celestia DA. So ping me in there. We're happy to help. We're also supporting the Mode team for this hackathon. So if you're launching Mode L3s, we've shared some testnet codes for them as well. So ping Fede from their team to get some Mode codes for Mode L3s. So yeah, just let me know in Discord if you guys have any questions about launching rollups on Conduit. happy to advise, happy to get you moving along, get you a free testnet code, and all of that jazz. And then in the meantime, I guess just follow us on Twitter and Warpcast to see the latest in Conduit.
So I'm glad to see a Farcast or Warpcast fan out there too. Yeah, I don't really have anything else on my end. So thank you again, Forrest.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, chat, for the good questions.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Josh.
Wishing everyone a good rest of your day and happy hacking for the rest of the Infinite Space Bazaar. Thank you again for coming.
Cheers, guys.